Hey everybody, thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm a little bit nervous, but just a tiny bit. So, but I'm super excited. This project was, you know, I think we wrote a book primarily because somebody said that we could. I mean, I would write a book probably about anything. We were pretty excited about it, but yeah, I mean, we basically, one, we kind of wanted to make a coffee table book that didn't suck, but we also I think, you know, Vinyl Me Please, as, you know, when we started Vinyl Me Please, it was very much like we wanted to be everybody's well, not everybody's, but we wanted to be your really excitable, hopefully lovable, music-obsessed brother or relative, the person who just gushes and gushes about music all the time. That's what we did, and that's what all of our friends did, and so we wanted to create a place for people who are like that, or that kind of thing, could all not literally convene, I guess, digitally, I guess, but a place where they could come and plug in and just gush about music that they like, and it wasn't as much about here's all the music we don't like, or here, you know, anything like that. We just wanted to celebrate great records. So, all that to say, this book ended up being a really perfect fit for us, I think, when the project first came up, because we wanted to put something together that was that the theme of it was albums that maybe albums that we felt like you sit down and it's each one of these has something very important to say. When you digest it, that each of these albums is definitely worth the time and attention to go through, that are worth stretching yourself a little bit sometimes with, and we wanted to have sort of a guide that's not these are the only 100 albums in the world that are good, or these are, you know, or anything like that. I guess we wanted to just be. Sorry, I'm just thinking 10 things at once. I apologize. No, I mean, we really wanted to be a place where you could sit down and flip through and read, sort of as an intro thing, why somebody loves this album so much. And then you can obviously, as a sort of a listening notes companion, I think, for a lot of these records. And I think one of the weird things when you love music, and especially now, because with social media and whatever, I think sometimes when you really love music, or it's you have, a lot of the tone, I think, sometimes is that really loving or celebrating music, you kind of become sort of a dickhead or something, where it's oh, a lot of people just talk about what they don't like, or that's a part of your identity is what you don't like, and that's fine. But I think, well, it's not fine, but always, but that's not really we didn't want to take that angle on it at all, and so anyway, so yeah, so and it was a dream for me. I mean, these are some of the people who wrote in the book. There's a lot more. It was a dream for me because I read all these people's stuff. I want to grow up and be as good as them as writers. And I was lucky to be on this and help Andrew and I work with Andrew to bring this together. So thank you guys again for coming. I know we're going to jump into stuff, but that's just a quick overview of why this book exists, I guess, and how it came to be.
Yeah, I think we want to talk, because when you whittle a book down to 100 albums, everybody always kind of wants to know, what is the process for doing this? How did you get down to 100? And so that process, basically, I started at Vinyl Me Please on January 4th, 2016. I think on January 6th, 2016, they told me we needed to turn this book in 8 weeks, and we needed to decide on a list. So between me, Tyler, and then Cameron Schaefer, who's our head of music at Vinyl Me Please, the three of us, I think, started with a list of 600 records, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. We just had a shared Excel sheet of everybody just throw albums you think people need to own on vinyl. And then we started hacking it down from there, and going down through the sheet together, on a Google Hangout, and just going through and going, okay, no, we don't need, 4 Kanye records in this book, or is it Zeppelin 3, 4, or Houses of the Holy that gets in here? We had to start making those decisions, and then I think we got it down to 100. And then that is not the 100 that ended up in the book, actually, because if you read the acknowledgments at the end, my girlfriend Amanda saw the list we had and said that our list was terrible and did not have enough women artists, which we realized yes, that's true. We don't think that as a company. We're we want to be more inclusive and have more women artists. So then we had to reconvene again on another call. And my girlfriend Amanda gave me a list of about 40 records she thought needed to be on there. And then we sort of kind of like, so in a way, she was like the fourth person making the list. Just from her, she literally yelled at me from the shower while she was getting ready about what we had. So we whittled it down to 100. And then basically set upon just trying to get writers that we liked to contribute to it. And that just meant sending around a Google sheet to the guys here, Eric, Drew, and Gary. And then I think we ended up with 21 or 22 total contributors. And Jeff Rickley is in the audience somewhere. He wrote a bunch for us too. Yeah, so that's how we like basically whittled it down to 100. And there isn't like, I wish we could say there was some scientific, like this is how it happened. I think that's what everybody kind of wants in the end with this book, but that's not really how we made the list. Yeah. So,
went with the gut. Went with the gut.
Went with the gut, yeah. It was basically all just like, yeah, do we put 808s and Heartbreak? Or, I don't know why I keep going back to Kanye. That really was like a huge argument for like which one gets in from Kanye. Yeah. So I think the way we're going to go through the panel is kind of each of the guys, we're all going to talk about one record that's in the book and then talk about why we chose that one. Because we didn't necessarily like force any of these guys to write about any records they didn't want. We wanted it to be records that they really loved. So they looked at the list and decided which ones they really wanted to cover. So I think we'll start down at the end. Sundermann.
Am I first? Okay.
Yeah, you're definitely first.
Thanks for having me.
Noisey.com. Check it out.
Best music website ever. So I've been bouncing back and forth. I wrote 5 essays for it. I think the one that I want to talk about is Fleetwood Mac Rumours, which is a record that everybody probably has. I think it's probably the most pressed record in like the history of vinyl. Like I think if you walk into any thrift store or anything, there's definitely like a 99-cent copy of Rumours. So to me, it felt like it's just the quintessential album to put on. It's a perfect record. It's I don't think there's anybody in this world who doesn't like Fleetwood Mac. I mean, I feel like they're the most beloved band of all time, and they've got like crazy stories, and you know, who hasn't ended up at like 3 a.m. partying, watching like old Stevie Nicks videos, you know, like, and so to me, it's like this record kind of, with what these guys are talking about, how this is just a book about music lovers, or like how you become a music lover, and this seems to be kind of a foundation for that, and so it felt like quite a privilege to write about something like Fleetwood Mac, and I think it was kind of fun going into it because, I mean, we only had like 500, 600 words, and it's like, where do you even begin when you start writing about some of these artists? Because it's like just a bunch of iconic artists and someone like Fleetwood Mac, and so to me, that was why that one spoke to me in particular. You know, it's just like a go-to record with some of the best songs that have ever been recorded. So it was pretty easy to come to that conclusion. How did I do?
You did good, man.
Okay, all right.
Name 5 Fleetwood Mac albums other than Rumours.
Tusk.
There's at least one self-titled.
Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah, there you go. Tango in the Night, man.
Yeah.
I asked Eric. You're right.
Gary is the ombudsman of Twitter and also this book panel.
I mean, and I think that's also a reason why it was fun to write about, because it's the only Fleetwood Mac album that anybody knows.
Nice save.
Thanks.
All right, Tyler, you want to go, or should we pitch to Drew?
Yeah, I can go. So the one I wrote 4. I wrote the beginning, or that's not called the beginning essay and the end essay, but that's what they are. And then I wrote 4 essays on albums. The one I want to talk about tonight is Discrete Music by Brian Eno. I love Brian Eno, And the reason that's not the reason that's in there, was partially the reason that album is in the book, but because I love it. But also I think like Brian Eno is so fascinating to me because he's got this sort of completely different take on music than so many other of his contemporaries, which I guess on face value is pretty obvious, but I think something like generative music is, as like a genre or a thing, whatever we want to call it, is always really fascinating because I think he has, it's like this approach that's much more architectural, right? But it's also sort of like architecture if like buildings could sort of build themselves, which I've always been like really fascinated by. I mean, so with Discrete Music is the first album that he put out under his full name. So it's not his first ever album. But the interesting thing about it to me too is that so we recorded it. It's like we think about loops and it's like a thing that happens in Ableton when you hit a button or something now. But like back then it was just like a literal tape that he would, literal tapes that he would record to, and then he would set them to loop and he would like snip them at different places. So he would basically set something in motion. So he would have these samples. I don't need to get way into the weeds on it. But you basically have a bunch of recorded samples and you'd essentially cut the tape or whatever. I'm not into all that. My point is he would cut the stuff that the music was on the tape, whatever that's called. And so he just presses play at the same time. And so these things start basically going at different, obviously they're moving at different loop speeds and stuff. And then he would record it and just sort of see how things went or where it ended up. So for him, it was just as much of an exploration, I think, as it is for us listening to it, because he literally was there wasn't nearly as much of the like song structures and crafting and things like that that we typically talk about. So a lot of people dismiss that, I think, along the way, or different people dismiss that along the way as not being really art or not really being like he's even said that he's not a musician, or I don't think he's ever called himself a musician per se, but it's always this like I love Discrete. Discrete music is so gorgeous and that style is so interesting to me, and I think it's, he just, with his last album, he released this app that I think the way that it works is that it's like always a different album. Like I think that his idea was to basically have like a perpetually evolving album that was literally never the same when you listen to it. I don't think he has like a condensed version that's just, you just listen to it and obviously it's the same, but he has an app where I think it changes all the time, and his idea was like more and more albums being like that, and I think that's such a cool idea that you would literally never listen to the same album twice, and to have somebody that's like such a visionary with stuff like that and has just pushed it for so long, and I think has been really unafraid to just be like the really weird guy who gets Coldplay to take sleeping pills or whatever and record or whatever he did with them. But he's just always just like, what?
I think Chris Martin was just addicted to sleeping pills.
Yeah,
on his own.
That's probably true. Yeah, no. So I just like it. And Discrete Music was like is like a hallmark record for a lot of reasons, and I think it's a really cool place. If you don't know Brian Eno, it's a really cool place to start with his music. And I thought like of all of his albums, as far as like the structures that he's known for, that's like such an obvious and like warm place to start with him, and it's a hard album to hate, I feel like, and so I think it's like a really good like 101 Brian Eno thing, and so that's the other reason that it's in the book, outside of me just loving it. So
what's the worst Brian Eno album to start with?
Man, the worst Brian Eno album. I really didn't like the one that was not the most recent one, but the one before that. I can't remember its
name. The one before that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Drew. What album?
Okay. So when Andrew asked me to contribute this book, I was like fairly broke. So I was just like, can I write about all of them? Like, but he said no for mysterious reasons. And the ones I wrote about were UGK's Ridin' Dirty, which is the greatest album of all time, and if anyone tells you otherwise, you should fight them. Kraftwerk's Trans Europe Express, some other ones, and Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. Also Rolling Stones' Sticky Fingers. But Appetite for Destruction is also the greatest album of all time. don't ask me how that works. But the cool thing about Appetite for Destruction is it killed hair metal. Everyone says that Nirvana's Nevermind killed hair metal. That's false. That's revisionist history. Like, Guns N' Roses were literally a fucking gang. They all lived in a garage together. It didn't have a toilet. They sold heroin, and they afforded their recording sessions by having sex with groupies, and one of them would have sex with a groupie, and then the rest of them would steal money from her purse. That's not an okay thing to do, but it's a thing that Guns N' Roses did, and they were a gang. And also people call it a hair metal album. That is incorrect. They had hair, and it is a metal album. But it's much more influenced by funk and samba than actual hair metal. They just kind of were in that scene. But actually, Guns N' Roses were playing shows with Red Hot Chili Peppers, who actually used to be good. R.I.P. to them being good. And Havel Hillel Slovak, also R.I.P. to him. Pour out some Corona on some rare books. But anyways, yeah, they actually, Peter Criss from Kiss offered to produce the album, but he told Axl Rose that they needed to add a verse to one of their songs, I believe, Mr. Night Train, one of the 15 songs about heroin on this 12-track album. And Axl Rose was just like, Peter Criss, I don't give a fuck about Kiss. You can go fuck yourself. And so they got a different producer, which I think is very chill. Anyways, Gary, do you have a question to ask me to trip me up?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay, great. All right, that's it. I'm out.
Gary.
Can I pass this round or? So like everybody else on this stage, I wrote for money. And so I got to write 5, which was the maximum number of ones you could write about, which is great. And one of the ones I wrote about, before I go into it, I'll ask you guys a question. What's your favorite jazz album? There's no wrong answers. Just what's your favorite jazz album? I'm not going to pick on you, I swear to God. Just name a fucking jazz album you like.
Future, Purple Rain.
Great. Others.
Okay, sketches of...
There we go. Okay. Thanks. So, okay, what's your favorite jazz album that came out after 1980?
Herbie Hancock, Monster.
The other Herbie Hancock one where he was doing crazy vocal.
That's in the 70s.
Headhunters.
The Miles Davis album he made with Easy Mode B.
Correct.
On the corner.
So
that's 72, dude.
Yeah. No. I know which one.
It was 94.
You're getting the title wrong, but you're right.
All right. Well.
So one of the ones I wrote about was Kumasi Washington's The Epic. Have you people heard of that record?
Yeah.
It is a jazz album that came after 1980. Interesting enough. I'm really happy to have the chance to actually talk about an album that came out less than 10 years ago. And there's a lot you can say about The Epic because it's fucking 3 hours long.
Triple LP, baby.
But really what it is Flying Lotus, who is a great producer and one of the greatest curators of our time, put it out on the Brain Feeder label. It takes a lot of guts to put out a 3-volume album all at one go. But it takes a lot more guts to record that sort of album with an expansive group. And I think what the album accomplishes, and why I really wanted to write about it, is what it accomplishes that so many records can't, is it made jazz cool again. It's like Miles Davis is always going to be cool. There's never going to be any fucking dispute on that. But it made jazz cool again, because if you think about jazz, and I say this, we're fully cognizant of the fact that my day job is managing a jazz club, is that it made jazz cool again. And it made something that young people listen to jazz again, because it had become the purview or the bailiwick of old people. It was the kind of thing that your folks went to go see, or your grandparents went to go see. You go over to Lincoln Center and you see it in these lovely rarefied, lovely place, and it's some gorgeous rooms there, but you pay quite a lot for it. And so it says a lot that there was a record that connected, that this is an artist that can play the same festivals as, I don't know, Kanye West and others. And really, obviously, a lot of credit for it can be given to Kendrick Lamar as well for having Kumasi and some of the other players on the record play on To Pimp a Butterfly. Obviously, that's a game-changing record that allowed for something like this to get the sort of exposure that it did, which was fantastic. But I think it also stands on its own for just being an audacious record, for having the guts to put out something that expansive from an artist that really up until that point was relatively unknown. And but for better or worse, I don't think you'd have had the last J. Cole record without it.
Oh! All right, my turn to ask a really difficult question. Gary, what is the most J. Cole, Kumasi, Washington song?
It's Born Sinner.
Wow, that's actually incorrect. You have to go now.
Sorry, all right. I need a beer anyways.
Here, you can have like the last third.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about a record. How many people are in here originally from the Midwest? Like, respect. Yeah, I'm from Wisconsin, and I'm going to talk about a record that is very important to basically everybody that was born in the Midwest that's like under, like probably 60 at this point. It's the Doobie Brothers, Minute by Minute. I was raised to think that Bruce Springsteen is a giant phony by aunts and uncles who owned every single Doobie Brothers record. And that's part of the reason this was one of the, like in our list making process, Minute by Minute was an album that I fought over and said I would quit Vinyl Me Please if we did not get to put, and I did not get to write an essay about Minute by Minute in the book.
Die for Michael McDonald.
Yeah, respect to Michael McDonald. I think anybody that has had the experience of starting collecting records from your parents, like I think it's how a lot of us, like if you have a record collection, you like get it passed down. And basically every relative that I have, and my dad, from a farm family, so my dad has 7 brothers and sisters, and every single one of them, when they would say like, here's my records, you can take them, every single one of them had Minute by Minute. Nobody like had more than one Beatles record in all of their collection. Nobody had a single Bruce Springsteen record. And I feel like the Doobie Brothers are like a band that kind of gets ignored in like the linear narrative of like rock history, like how big, like in the Midwest, that band, like they are like the Beatles of the 70s. And I felt like this was an opportunity for me to like represent this band that like every car trip I took up until I could drive my own car was soundtracked by part of Minute by Minute. So, and it's a very cheap record too, because that was part of the thing we were talking about was like, I mean, we want to make this book like a guide, and you can pretty much, I'm sure that any record store in Brooklyn has Minute by Minute, but for $5 or less. Mm-hmm. So, and it should be more expensive. It's a really great record. What a Fool Believes is like the best song of the latter half of the 21st century.
The love for this song and this band and this record is extremely real from Storfer, because one of my favorite things that we've ever published on Noisey was a list of the 45 greatest Doobie Brothers songs of all time, and it was What a Fool Believes 45 times.
I found a way to write about What a Fool Believes 45 different ways.
You knew it was real because he was dropping facts about the song and with like number 7, you know?
It's very like Janet Malcolm 41 false starts way of writing with Doobie Brothers. Andrew, which came first, the term doobie for a marijuana cigarette or the Doobie Brothers?
So the Doobie Brothers started as a band playing for Hell's Angels in the like late 60s. So I mean, I don't really know. Like I don't know when did the doobie become a thing, you know?
I don't know.
Does anybody know? We're in the rare book. Yeah. Is anybody knowledgeable on the lineage of the word doobie?
Does anybody have a doobie?
Does anybody have a doobie? We could perhaps, yeah. I mean, so we've already gone like a half an hour. Do we want to open it up to Q&A, or do we want to do you guys have questions? We'll answer pretty much anything you want to know. Like, you can ask us personal questions too if you want. That's fine. I mean, otherwise one of the things we could talk about is like albums that we would want to be in the book if we could redo it. But Yeah. No, let's have a question from Kyle Kramer up here in the front.
Oh, Kyle Kramer.
Okay.
Kyle Kramer, Noisey.com.
Hello. Oh, yeah. You said that you fought really hard for the Doobie Brothers. What were some of the albums that were left on the cutting room floor, and why did you have to give up on them?
I would like to know that too, because just for the record, we had nothing to do with the choices of the book.
Yeah, we sent them the finished list, and we're like, "Do you guys want to write any of these?" Yeah.
Like, all right.
I don't know, Tyler. Do we so the Google Doc that we had when we assigned writers to everything is the Google Doc that we had when we cut it down to 100. So
I honestly, I mean, I think you were right about 600. I mean, it was the most annoyingly long list of largely unrelated
I think we
albums
let like
that's
a couple
ever been
other
made.
people on staff kind of like pop in there, and then people were like, there were duplicates.
Yeah,
I think
mean,
like the answer is like narrowing it down to one album. We made that decision kind of like late in the process. Was like the only artist that has 2 records is Kanye, actually.
Yeah.
Because Watch the Throne is in the book and 808s and Heartbreak is. But we like decided like, no, we're not going to put 2 Miles Davis records. So like winnowing that down. And
yeah, like I mean, there was a lot. I mean, a lot of like sort of not like sub eras or like secondary eras of music that we could only really take one album from.
Right.
So like a lot of stuff from like early 2000s rock, or I mean, there's just a lot of places where you drill down and it was just like, we have to pick one out of 50 that we
and we like, I remember cutting the Sex Pistols.
It's
I was just like, it's a fine record, and I feel like you're not going to read anything new about the Sex Pistols.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why no Nick Cave?
That, you know,
is a good
it's a
question.
good. I think the honest answer is I've listened to like 2 Nick Cave records in my life.
I have a question that isn't pointed at all. Why no Thursday or Das Racist?
I mean,
Yeah.
I would have lobbied for Relax to be on there, but
yeah, no, I mean, I was about to talk about a Thursday record. I wish that they had been in there. They're
Yeah.
like one of my favorite bands of all time.
and he's not just saying. Where is Rickley still in here?
I think so. I don't know.
Did he leave?
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so, but yeah, no, I mean, bands like that, I literally was going to talk about Full Collapse on the ones that we wish got in. So I wish it were in there. I don't know.
I actually wish that Sit Down Man by Das Racist were...
It's not on vinyl though, man.
I know, but I wish that it would be on vinyl and then be in the book.
Yeah.
Hi, Heems. But no, that actually is one of my favorite albums of all
Yeah,
time.
me too.
Was it hard? Like, was it like excruciating? I mean, you had to put the book together quickly, and so you had to make these decisions quickly. So, like, you know, was it painful?
I mean, it was painful, but then it was sort of like we all kind of had hills we were going to die on.
Right.
That like, I know that Cam like demanded that Chills record get in the book because he was like, anybody that like a record collector that picks that up is going to be like, yeah, the Chills are in here.
Yeah.
And we were like, we've never listened. Yeah, I know. I know.
Chills.
Like I've listened to that record. It's great, but like, yeah.
Oh. No,
What if you only made the book artists whose last name rhymed with ills, like The Thrills and
The Psychic Ills.
Yeah.
I'm just going to turn this into a rhyme
T
game.
Mills.
I mean, you could have done that, I guess.
Yeah, it would have had to have a different title.
I mean, I think the main thing that
All right,
happens.
let's just
with
restore
this-
order to this chaos that I caused.
I mean, the main thing that happens with this is that like you're asking for a consensus pick of 100 records from a group of largely white guys, which, as you can see from the diversity on this panel, is indicative of the problem with this book. And, you know, for me, like, from my perspective is, you know, there are areas where this could have been improved. And I don't just mean the panel, but I mean in terms of the actual book. And again, I recognize, you know, Andrew and I have talked about this because I give my opinion often.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things with me that really got is I think there are some areas, there are some gaps, and there's some holes that exist. I think there's a real lack of Latino artists in the book. I think it would have been great to have something, especially since these were, and I'm thinking from these American artists, and of course I have a New York bias, but these New York artists, I'm thinking about artists like Hector Lavoe and Tito Puente and Celia Cruz and Eddie Palmieri especially. I would argue that, you know, Vámonos Palmonte was like
a classic record. And I think what a book like this does, and the purpose of a book like this, is that it provides these entry points. It provides an opportunity to jump off from. I would have personally liked something that would have jumped off from that period, but I think everybody has their thing. Like, I don't know about the Chills. I am not hugely versed in the music of New Zealand, but that is potentially a point at which I could listen to that record and find something else about. So when they do the next 100 of these, I imagine after you all buy a copy, then they'll listen to my complaints.
We'll have you on the list process. Oh, good. What's up, Dan?
Yeah, so I have a question. So this book is about albums that you need to own on vinyl.
Yes.
Andrew, you definitely addressed this. I think, Eric, you touched on it a little bit, but for the rest of you guys, you talked about why you love these albums, why these albums were so important to you, why people should pay attention to these albums, but why on vinyl specifically?
Well, actually, I can talk about this with Guns N' Roses, because actually Guns N' Roses was literally kind of the last big record mastered in the same way that classic rock albums were, and that they were like mastered for vinyl rather than CD or cassette or like digital streaming or download or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with like mastering a record a different way, but I think that certain records, like certain formats, demand different mixing and mastering styles, and I think a lot of the albums on this list have been mastered with specifically vinyl in mind, and so that is the preferred format of the artist, and kind of the sound you get from vinyl is the way that they intended the record to be heard.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it's a little, like, slightly more philosophical. I think obviously the internet rules, we all live and breathe on it, but I think that one of the cool things to me about vinyl is that, and one of the things that I've always has drawn me to it, is that I think I love Spotify. They're awesome. I use it all the time. I've given them a ton of my money. But like, I think one of the things with like apps like that or streaming services is that you hit a point, I think, where it starts to feel like the music is mostly about you, where it's always like, here's what you'll like, or here's your recommendations, or here's all the stuff you've been listening to, or whatever, and it's for all these moods that you're in and whatever. And the thing that I really like about vinyl is that it's a nice reminder, for me at least, in music, that like sometimes art just isn't fucking about you. Like sometimes it's just somebody made this thing and it's really awesome. And I think like physical vinyl in particular is such like a particular way to memorialize stuff that you really love, and I think a particular way to listen to it. And it sounds dumb, but it's like you have to stand up and go get it, and you have to put it on a thing, and then you go sit down, and then you have to go flip it over, and it like you're engaged in it in some ways, but it's also very separate from you. And so I don't mean to go way down like some philosophical hole, but I think like the albums that, from my perspective, I think all these albums, and to Gary's point, many other albums, and that just deserve to be consumed a certain way. Like they deserve to not be skipped around and not be like listened to just like for a few minutes here and there or whatever. I think there are artists who are worthy of giving an hour a day to just like listen to them. Literally, I mean, it's like so obvious. Obviously, you're listening to them, but I mean, like in the way that you read a book. It's like you read a book and you're always a little bit different at the end, right? And I think great albums are the same, and I think the really great albums are that way no matter how many times you've heard them. And so I think like, I think to that point, I like all of these on vinyl. For me, is just more of like, here's 100 records that I think deserve to take up space in the place that you live, and deserve to like have your ear for a bit and like teach you something, and the artist behind them to teach you something. And I wish we could have written much more on each one, because I think like a lot of these artists, even like as I was reading all of when we were editing it, I edited most of the book on an exercise bike. I don't know why. I was just on a diet at the time, but it was like, I just remember like reading through them, and it's like you learn so much, and hanging out with these guys or talking to them, it's like you learn so much just about artists that you don't know. And I think when you like, context is such a cool thing on albums that you love, and how they were made, and the scene they came out of, and who's been inspired by them, by listening to them in the same way that you have, and then what they've made because of that, and all that stuff. And it's kind of like what we all do as our day job, is just telling those stories. And I wish that we could have told a lot more around these albums, because I think, like, for me, knowing more about the artist in the album makes it even better for some reason. So yeah, so I don't want to keep rambling, but that's, I guess, from my perspective, that's...
I mean, my answer to that question is much more superficial. It's Kumasi Washington record is a gorgeous package. It's one of the most beautiful vinyl packages I've seen. You know, they really put a lot of care into it. It came out months after the actual album came out. It's just a beautiful thing to own, and I think it speaks to kind of our, you know, our current fetishism that allows for something like this to happen, a book like this or a company like Vinyl Me Please to happen, and these special things you want to own and look through and play with. And that's what, for me, that the Kumasi Washington record in particular embodies that. It's that perfect sort of thing. It's very modern in its presentation and very beautiful.
And I think there's
I just going off of kind of what you were saying, I think that there was this period, probably like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, where vinyl became almost like a cliche, like associated with like the hipster lifestyle or whatever that means. And it was like, now it's sold in Urban Outfitters. And I think it's easy to shit on like the idea of like getting vinyl or whatever that means. But something that I think I'm continuing to learn in my life, like as I get older and the internet continues to ruin the way that I think, like I think that there's a lot of value in investing in things that you like, and investing in art that is worth it, and investing in music that's worth it. It's like why you go to a concert, you know, you pay for a concert ticket. Why not spend $25 on vinyl and like have it be an experience for you and something that's memorable? Like the favorite record that I own is, I have like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy on vinyl, and it's like a beautiful package, and it's like Kanye went to fucking Hawaii and like flew all of the rap world out there to make this record.
And Bon Iver.
Yeah, and to make this record, and it's worth it, and it makes you kind of makes you physically stop and think about it. And I think that as like feeds continue to like control our lives, it's important to make active decisions against that.
And I think piggybacking on what Eric said, there's also an important point to be made about, or argument rather, that vinyl as a format is a reaction against streaming. Because when you stream a song on Spotify, you are doing it for free or $10 a month or whatever the fuck, because Spotify is paying or is selling your data, like your taste, to other companies so that they can market to you. Not to get all like 1984 or whatever, but when you go to a thrift store, vinyl record store, and buy a record with cash, there is absolutely no way that someone can market to you because of your taste. And I think that is a very important thing to remember in the age of everyone is constantly being hyper-targeted marketing. There's hyper-targeted marketing, and everyone is subject to it at all times.
Stay woke.
So we got time for like 1 or 2 more questions.
Hi. I feel like I'm close enough that I don't need this. I wanted to know if there were any records that were struck that someone felt adamantly about, like, absolutely not, that's staying on. If there were any disagreements in that, and also how that worked when the decision was made to be more inclusive of female artists. Was it like, shit, now we got to get rid of, 5 in order to sub in 5 more? How did that work? Was there some?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer the second part of that first. It was really like figuring out, like, the problem, like, historically with women artists is that they're painted as singles artists, like, particularly in the vinyl era. Like, Aretha Franklin doesn't necessarily have, like, the defining, like, one record. Like, her greatest hits is, like, her biggest selling record, right? I mean, like, I've Never Loved a Man Like I Love You is, like, a classic, but that's, like, less known, I think, than, like, and then when you break down, like, we wanted to have more country artists in there too. That was like something that happened in tandem with that, and it's really hard to like pick one Dolly Parton record for the same reason. So we ended up with a Loretta Lynn record because she is like was given more time to be like an albums artist, and there wasn't like a set number ever. It was like what records on this list that we like came up with then. Like absolutely, like we looked over and need to be in the book, and then which I really remember the process of like deciding which ones we cut. We just did it. It was like Nina Simone's "Nina Sings the Blues" needs to be in here. Like something's losing. Like and yeah.
Yeah, I mean it happened. We would have these like super long phone calls where everybody was on the Excel, and we would just argue and then move on. Like it wasn't. We didn't have a ton of time. I mean, we got like okay, we're doing it, and then it was like, okay, it's all due in 8 weeks, or a little bit less.
Yeah, I think it was like 7 total by the time we started
and
doing
so
it.
like we basically spent 4 or 5 days, like not literally all day, but a good portion of that time, like hacking. We probably went through like 10 or 11 versions of the list between like stuff like iterations of it. Where more than just like 10 or 11 times we took one off. I mean, like, does it look very different? And so I think.
Well, and what records? I know that Cam fought for the Chills. I fought over the Doobie Brothers and Clips's Lord Willin'. I was like, and actually UGK's Riding Dirty is in the book. Like those 3 were like 3 that I was like, they need to be in this book if I'm going to work on it. I don't know if you like what.
Yeah, I really wanted to put the evenings record.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
and that was that one, and I really wanted to do discrete music instead of any of the other ones. But I really wanted evenings in. He's from Charlottesville, where my folks live, and we have become friends. I just have been a huge fan of his music since college, and it was the best. To me, it was like some of the best in that type of music that I had heard in years. And so I was like, I really feel like we need to put. There'll be plenty of people who will read through this and not know some of the artists anyway. That's totally fine. But I really wanted to put somebody in that was just like kind of out of nowhere, like a for real, like medium to pretty like regionally well known sort of thing, but not like doesn't have like some huge historical timeline behind him at all. And I don't remember if we did that anywhere else, but I wanted there to at least be one. So that was the only one that I remember getting like, I didn't get like heated about it, but I just remember being like, this is not leading.
We're pretty mild-mannered. We're pretty mild-mannered people generally. Like there wasn't like a whole lot of fights. They mostly like when I said I was going to quit, they were like, "Oh, fine. Like we'll leave it in there." Like that was about I think next question.
In the same way how where an athlete might have like a breakout season or an MVP season, and then people inevitably start talking about Hall of Fame career. Who's the artist that you might have thought of one album and maybe they don't have enough duration of their career to really put them in the book that you thought maybe in 5 years they'd be in the book?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, a simple one was Acid Rap would have been in there if it were on vinyl, but there's only bootleg copies. But yeah, I mean, Chance is awesome. Acid Rap, I think. I like Coloring Book a lot. I think Acid Rap is his best work so far. I love it. I love that album completely, but it just wasn't on vinyl. So that's like an up-and-coming person that would have 100% been in there as like trying to call our own shot a little bit. Man.
Yeah, I mean, but you're also talking about like artists who had like one really great album and maybe the other ones were okay or whatever, but like for me, like I think about Andrew WK's I Get Wet, which is just like my favorite, one of my favorite albums of all time and my favorite heavy metal album, period, which gets me in some trouble. But I love that record so much, but like I don't think The Wolf, even though it has similarities to it, stands up to that. And later records like Cadillac 55, where he's doing solo piano, it's just like, I think that record was just a perfect thing, and it was just that one time, and I don't think he's ever going to try to make that record again, and I don't think we want him to make that record again. We want him to go on tour and play that record over and over again, but that's the sort of example for me, like you make that case of an artist who put out one great record, that was undeniably great, that you can get a nodding heads in a room when you say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we know like if there was anybody in the discussion of the list that like we
Are you
cut
asking
because
like
of
right
it.
now? Like if are you saying like if somebody
That made
now,
the book, I think,
Oh.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there there's no Kendrick in the album?
No.
Or in the
Yeah, and
book?
I think that was one.
You guys fucked up.
Well, I don't know that To Pimp a Butterfly was out on like official vinyl.
Yeah, but what about
by the time that
Good
we
Kid?
did the list?
Yeah.
Did you guys put Little B's Rain in England?
That is on vinyl actually. Yeah.
If not, this book is invalid.
I mean, one of the things you guys did do with this book is that for each of the listings of the albums, you've included some other albums that would be worthwhile. So with the Kumasi record, To Pimp a Butterfly is in there as one of the recommended records. So, I mean, you got it in there, the asterisk.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we split on the vote actually on Kendrick.
Yeah.
Because I think I was Good Kid, Mad City.
Yeah, I think we just couldn't settle on
Yeah.
which one, and I felt like To Pimp a Butterfly was like a really great album, but I felt like I liked Good Kid, Mad City better as like an album that I listened to a lot. Like To Pimp a Butterfly was more something that I would like listen to once every few months or something. And I think whoever else was in on that, Cameron or someone, I think we just couldn't settle on it. And then when we were adding, like taking people out and adding them, I think we just so.
Any more questions, or do we have time for any more?
One more.
How many hands up?
Hi. So it seems like the trend of vinyl rising has been followed for a while, and all whether or not people think it was, for laughs at the time, it's being more seriously considered now. It seems like trend-wise, the increases are not really leaping as much. It's kind of stabilized, and you look at that extrapolated, like it's not going to come anywhere near the growth that it did have. I don't know. I guess like what are your maybe not even projections, because who knows, but like what are your hopes for something like what you do, and as far as this being a part of people's lives to, I don't know, sustain to be?
I mean, I think vinyl is. I think in my mind we're past the point of it being like a fad to what you were saying. I mean, I think that was like there was definitely a bump for a few years. In my mind, I think vinyl is sort of parasitic is like a weird word to use, but it's like sort of very closely tied, I think, to the growth in streaming. I think vinyl is the way that people will continue to memorialize albums that they love. In the same way that we have watches, even though we have the time on our iPhone. I mean, like, I think there's something about vinyl. I think vinyl is to music sort of like what watches are to. It's not really time, I guess. Time is a construct, okay? But in the sense of just like as a lifestyle thing. But I think that vinyl, like, we're not gonna start buying. Like, I don't think CDs are gonna come back. I think the tape stuff is fine. I think that's just more of a flash in the pan thing. I don't even know how to play a cassette tape. I don't have any.
As someone who owns a cassette player with a car wrapped around it, I disagree. But
yeah. So but I just mean, like, I think vinyl has moved through the sort of product life cycle thing where it's like it's found a new meaning. It used to be just the way that you listen to music. That's all that there was for a while. And I think it went through the time of like, all right, it's not very practical. People aren't very into it. And I think we've moved. So I think we've come through that time. And it's just found a new place where it's like now there's like it has like almost like a different role while it still does the other stuff, right? So I think in that sense, I think streaming will continue to get big, is my guess. It's all indicators are in that direction. My guess that will have a huge effect on the kinds of deals that artists are signing and label structures and all sorts of things going forward, but that like vinyl will be the way that you own music. I don't think we'll even probably be owning MP3s like on any meaningful scale 5 or 10 years from now. But my guess is that like vinyl will move into like the primary format in which we own stuff, and then we just listen digitally wherever we are for a monthly fee. And so in that sense, I think I'm very optimistic on the future of vinyl, and I think for good reason. So obviously I think the reasons are good. Not everybody has to think that, but so that's, I don't know if that answers your question, but
I think even if something happens and the major labels give up on vinyl, it will continue to be a thing that indie labels, as they have been doing, and I think about like scenes like hardcore, for example, where it's just like you can get any hardcore album you can get on vinyl pretty much, new and old, which is awesome. And it's great when you go to these shows and you can still get those records. So I think even if the major labels ultimately find out that, oh, we're not making enough money off this, margins aren't what we want them to be, although the margins are pretty fucking great right now, then there will still be plenty of things to play on your turntables.
Yeah. Maybe you'll be 3D printing your records at home. I have no idea. So.
All right, yeah. Hey, everyone, thank you so much for coming. And let's thank these guys again.
Thanks.